Good evening, and welcome to the Aim Higher Achieve More Education Forum. I'm Emma Battle from Higher Education Works Foundation, and we're delighted to have you join us this evening for what will be an informative discussion about the value of public higher education in communities. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize a couple of people. First, our esteemed speakers. Fortunately, Senator Lee was called into session, and he is unable to join us, and he sends his regrets. But we are pleased to have Governor Cooper, President Spellings, House Speaker Tim Moore, and Acting President HAYCOOD. Thank them all very much for caring about public higher education and for making time in their schedules to join us. We're very appreciative. Will other elected officials, if you're in the room, raise your hand or stand. We'd like to thank you for coming as well. We did have quite a few of you to register. Thank you very much for being here. Will all faculty and staff from UNC Charlotte please raise your hand or say hi or stand? UNC. Thank you very, very much for being here to support us. Unfortunately, our event did conflict with an event, and Chancellor Dubois was not able to be here, but he did send Dean Ellen McIntyre, who will be joining us later for the Q&A session. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank Bank of America, who helped us by being generous and sponsoring this event. Andrea Smith, Christine Katzev, Greg Cox, Charles Bowman, Lauren Woodruff, and the entire Bank of America team, thank you very much for your very generous support. Let's give them a hand. I'd also like to thank colleagues from Higher Education Works Foundation. Paul Fulton, who is the founder of our organization, is here, and you'll hear from him later. David Rice, Matthew Chamberlain, Deborah Roselli, and Tricia Daisley. You guys, along with our videographer, Jean-Paul Daumet from Firehorse Films, really made this event special. Matthew was especially instrumental in working with Charles Bowman and Greg Cox at Bank of America to secure funding. And without Paul Fulton, we would have no speakers. Let's give them a round of applause. And finally, will the faculty, staff, and students of Central Piedmont Community College please stand? We want to recognize you. Stand. You guys are amazing. Thank you for attending, for helping to pull all the event details together. Kevin McCarthy, Donnell Steins-Jones, Don Cloutier, Mike Hamrick, Jeff Lawrence, and the entire CPCC crew. We couldn't have done it without you. And of course, this excellence wouldn't take place without an excellent leader, Dr. KANDI DEITEMEYER. We can't thank you enough. About Dr. DEITEMEYER, where Dr. DEITEMEYER became the 4th president of Central Piedmont Community College in January 2017. Her pathway to success began at Polk Community College in Florida, where she graduated with an Associates of Arts degree. From there, Dr. DEITEMEYER went on to earn a bachelor's degree in mass communications and a public relations and master's degree in counselor education, and a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Florida. Immediately following, prior to coming to CPCC, Dr. DEITEMEYER served as president of the College of Albemarle in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and her 24-year career included 22 years serving in community college systems in North Carolina, Kentucky, and Florida. As CPCC's top executive, Dr. DEITEMEYER demonstrates drive, talent, and passion for its mission. Her principal leadership tenet is student success in transforming and improving lives. She brings to CPCC a demonstrated focus on excellence, regional development, and building collaborative relationships that impact opportunities for students and communities. While Dr. DEITEMEYER's professional goals is leading CPCC in its efforts as a national leader in workforce development, she derives her personal joy from faith and family, her husband Gary and daughter Zoe. To take us through the rest of the evening, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. KANDI DEITEMEYER, President of Central Piedmont Community College. Let's give her a hand.
Good evening, and welcome to Central Piedmont Community College. It's certainly our pleasure to host this evening, and it certainly is my great pleasure to serve as president of Central Piedmont Community College. It's our great pleasure not only to serve as the host, because this is an important discussion tonight about the vital role of higher education in North Carolina. Many thanks to each of you for joining us, as I said, and it is truly gratifying to see such a level of turnout tonight and the interest in this important topic, not only for our local community, but certainly the important future of our state. Many thanks to Emma Battle for her kind words of introduction. It is indeed, as I said, my privilege and honor to serve as the fourth president of one of the best community colleges in our great country, an institution which extends more opportunities to 70,000 plus individuals each year. I wish to extend a special welcome to Governor Cooper and our panelists. President Spellings, Acting President HAYCOOD, Speaker Moore, and Senator Lee will be joining you in just a few minutes, and so I want to thank them for their participation in this special evening. A special welcome, as was already said, and extended to our state and local officials. We also have college trustees with us tonight. Thank you for being here and supporting this great institution, and also foundation directors and representatives of really the philanthropic community and sector of this great community who do so much to advance higher education, not only here locally, but across our great state. At this time, it really is a distinct pleasure and honor to introduce Andrea Smith. Andrea is the Chief Administrative Officer of Bank of America and a member of the company's executive management team. In her position, she oversees global corporate strategy, guiding efforts to serve customers and clients through 8 lines of business. In addition, Andrea oversees global real estate vendor management and supplier diversity programs for the company. I'm grateful for all of Andrea's efforts in our community, especially not only at the company of Bank of America, but I've come best to understand and appreciate what she does as I've gotten to work alongside her. She does so much for our community. Her level of service really is truly impressive. She is chair of the Charlotte Chamber for 2017, and is on the boards of the Charlotte Ballet, the Charlotte Sports Foundation, Discovery Place, and International Women's Media Foundation. Importantly for our community, she is co-chair of the Leading on Opportunity Council to address economic mobility changes in our Charlotte area, and it's my privilege to serve with her on that committee. As a presidential point of privilege, I want to just, before I invite her out here, she's got the really great honor to introduce the governor. But I want to take a presidential privilege, if I may, and just thank her publicly. Because when I joined the community almost 9 months ago, or now 9 months ago, she was one of the first individuals to reach out to me, welcome me, ask me how she could help me, and she has certainly brought me into the community work that I think is so important, again, back to economic mobility. So I want to say again, thank you to her. We look forward to hearing from her, and would you please acknowledge Andrea Smith from Bank of America.
Thank you, KANDI. It's great to be here today with all of you. I'd also like to echo KANDI's thanks to Emma Battle and her team for all they do to ensure North Carolinians have access to public higher education. We are proud at Bank of America to support your efforts to create affordable, quality education for students throughout our state. This is an incredible panel of education thought leaders that are assembled tonight to discuss and ultimately drive action on this important issue. As KANDI said, higher education is an absolute imperative for the future of our state and for our workforce. 2 out of every 3 new jobs now require some form of post-secondary education, whether that's training credentials, an associate degree, a 4-year degree, or higher. And this reality really underscores how critical higher education is to career growth and how important it is to increasing economic mobility and creating a more equitable system so that all of our citizens can thrive. Our state has a long history of exceptional higher education, but it requires continued investment to stay innovative, competitive, and to ensure access for all of our citizens. And I know that is something that all of us here in this room tonight are committed to achieving together. Now, I'm honored to introduce Governor Roy Cooper, who has long been a champion of education. As you may know, his mother was a school teacher, and he himself attended college at University of North Carolina as a Moorhead Scholar. He has a long-time career in public service supporting our great state, from his time serving in the State House and the Senate to his years serving as Attorney General. We look forward to hearing from him tonight about his education vision for North Carolina. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Governor Roy Cooper.
Thank you, Andrea Smith, for your leadership in a global company, but we know you call Charlotte and North Carolina home, and you emphasize that. So thank you, Andrea. And she's going to be leading the Governor's Business Council as we go into the fall and into the new year, making sure that we create a better economy for everyone. Looking forward to the input of President Margaret Spellings and Acting President Jennifer Haygood and House Speaker Tim Moore. Because of scheduling, I have to head back, but I look forward to reading and reviewing all of their remarks and what we get out of this. Paul Fulton deserves amazing credit. For those of you who've had a conversation with Paul, you know that he is a fierce, bipartisan advocate for higher education. And he and I have had numerous passionate discussions about it. And higher education does work, Paul Fulton, and I'm grateful for your leadership. And Dr. DEITEMEYER, thank you for opening up this great campus, this community college. I've been here quite a bit and know the great work that's going on here. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. My mom was a school teacher. They taught me hard work, and they put me out on the farm to work on the farm early, and I learned I really wanted a job with air conditioning. I'm grateful for the people of giving me that opportunity. But, you know, I learned that education was a core value in my family. And I'll never forget the first time I walked on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. As many of you have done, walked on your college for the first time, and my life changed. I obviously received knowledge, but I got experience. I established relationships, and that translated not only into a career for me, but a more abundant and purposeful life. And I am personally grateful to this great state of North Carolina for providing me a public education, for my college and law school education, and for the public education of my 3 daughters. And I'm grateful to the education and business leaders that came decades before me, who had the vision and the foresight to put education at the forefront. A lot of people ask me why I ran for governor, and for you business people in here, you know a CEO needs a mission statement. I have a mission statement. I want North Carolina to be a place where people are better educated, where they're healthier, where they have more money in their pockets, and where they have the opportunities to live a more abundant and purposeful life. That's what I want. I tell my cabinet members, members of my staff, state employees, to keep that vision in their minds on a daily basis with everything they do. And part of that vision is for us together, all of us, the panelists, the people out there in this room, to make North Carolina a top 10 educated state by 2025. Not only can we do that, but we must. Now, I believe our higher education is there now already, but we have to look at the whole spectrum. And that means establishing metrics, which we're working to do now. But first, we have to invest in early childhood education and pre-K. CEOs know that the data is there, and it is stark. And all you have to do is walk into an elementary school and talk to kindergarten teachers. They can tell who had early childhood, who had pre-K. We need to increase the number of kids who are in pre-K to at least 55% and even more. Right now, we're around 35%. And this budget established 75% of the slots on the waiting list. My budget had 100%, but we need to go even more than that. We have to get our teacher salaries to at least the national average in K through 12. And our education and the right to a sound basic education is in our Constitution. And the Supreme Court, the North Carolina Supreme Court, in the Leandro case ruled that to be the case. And it has been interpreted to mean a good teacher in every classroom and a good principal in every school. You give me those two things, we're going to do a lot. I've established the Leandro Commission, which is going to work with the plaintiffs in that lawsuit to present a settlement to the judge and hopefully work with the General Assembly and everyone to make sure we do that. We need a greater percentage of our kids to graduate from high school. And, as Andrea mentioned earlier, we have to have a higher percentage of post-high school attainment. I went and spoke to my old high school, the graduating class. I went to school in Nash County, played against Phil Ford in high school, blocked his shot in high school. He got 52 points that night, but not 54. But we have to increase the number of people who have four-year degrees, associate degrees, and certifications. I told that high school graduating class that over half the jobs that they would have an opportunity to get in their lifetimes have not even been invented yet. That shows you the importance of education. And President Spellings and Acting President HAYCOOD and the Secretary of Commerce and Health and Human Services and the Department of Public Instruction head, Mark Johnson, they're on Education Cabinet, which I chair. We're going to figure out what is post-education attainment and how do we measure it, and to make sure that we set those metrics for our state. Why is higher education so important? Why is it so critical? Well, my job as governor, one of my jobs, is to bring jobs to this state. And when I talk to CEOs and try to get them to come to North Carolina, they talk to me about the quality of life, about transportation, infrastructure, energy, the business and tax climate, incentives. But the number one question they ask me is not, what is your corporate tax? The number one thing they ask me is, do you have the well-trained workforce? Do you have that talent? Do you have the people who can perform the jobs that I create? Now, North Carolina's higher education, our reputation is excellent. We have in this state 53 universities and 58 community colleges. And we are known across the world for our higher education. They know that they will get a well-trained workforce when they come to North Carolina, and that's part of the reason why it's so important. I was on the campus of UNC Charlotte not too long ago, and what they're doing right now with big data and data analytics is amazing. And Andrea, I talked to a young student who was about to graduate and head to Bank of America. These companies need these employees, and they have jobs for them if we can just get them educated and trained. We also know that we need to make higher education work because it's simply an economic engine for our state, aside from the education that it provides for people. Generates billions of dollars. Just look at the medical research. Today, Chancellor Carol Folt of UNC Chapel Hill and I were at Pfizer, and they took gene therapy technology that was developed at the University of North Carolina, and now they've got 40 new good-paying jobs in Sanford where they're going to be manufacturing products that will improve people's lives, that will save people's lives, and will bring money to our state. So clearly, it's an economic engine for us. Okay, so what can we do? Hopefully we'll get some more answers tonight. But first, we cannot rely on our reputation. It requires constant work. We have to make higher education more affordable and effective. Our community colleges play a critical role in that. 4-year degrees for some people have become unaffordable, particularly in our middle class. We've seen the economy improve, unemployment has gone down, stock market is up, but those middle class wages aren't where we want them to be. And we need to educate parents and we need to educate kids that there are careers for them with some education right after high school where they can go almost immediately and it won't cost them an arm and a leg. We have to, in addition, create an atmosphere in our educational institutions and in our state of diversity and inclusiveness. I've appointed the most diverse cabinet in the history of our state, but I also think it is the most competent. When you think about North Carolina, we are diverse. Do you know that children in our homes in this state live in homes where 100 different languages are spoken? We have to do more to encourage inclusiveness and diversity. We have to show that we value education. We have to use it as an economic tool. And we have to work hard to not let our political differences divide us. I think the president of our university needs to be allowed to do her job. The Board of Governors needs to set policy, but then she needs to be allowed the freedom to execute. And I look forward to talking with her more about that and to hearing what they have to say. We need to give our presidents and our chancellors flexibility. And we need to make sure that all branches of government are involved in higher education. It makes them all stronger. The recent taking away of the governor's appointments to university boards of trustees doesn't help those universities. I'm not going to be governor forever. Legislature's not going to be there forever, but the system will be. And there needs to be input from all of us. And then, the big deal, funding. Education investment in our state has not caught up to pre-recession levels. We are behind. And I speak at chambers of commerce across this state, and I give them pretty much the same message. I tell them about economic recruitment. They tell me that they want the workforce. And often, over the last few years, we've had a lot of debates and fights about workers' compensation and unemployment and tort reform. And I think a lot of those issues are behind us now, and I want the business community to make education a priority. And I want them to use their political capital to influence the governor's office, the state legislature, the Congress, that they need to value education and that the state needs to continue to invest in education. We've seen examples of states who have made other choices and have continued to cut taxes to the point where, for example, in Oklahoma, they're raising tuition at their universities, and their public schools, some of them have started going to school only 4 days a week because they don't have the money. We cannot let that happen in North Carolina. So I tell the business groups that they need to support education, but they need to go a step further. They need to tell them we need to stop cutting the corporate tax, and we need to stop cutting individual income tax for the wealthiest among us. Because if we continue that process, and I'm not saying that we need to raise taxes, but what I'm saying is we continue that process, you just simply won't have the money to make the investments that we need to make. So the business community needs to make this two-pronged argument. Because you can say you support education all you want to. I'd say one thing to that. Show me your budget. Show me your budget. When you show me your budget, you show me your priorities. I believe that in North Carolina, we can pull together and we can make those investments that we need to make sure that we are a top 10 educated state by 2025, to make sure that we continue the reputation that we have across the world. People are jealous of our higher education system. We cannot let it go. It requires constant vigilance. Higher education does work. We just need to make sure that it does. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Well, thank you to Governor Cooper for his remarks and for his presence here this evening. I think we've set the tone for the conversation ahead. Certainly his time and commitment to education is appreciated. So we understand, as he mentioned, that he needs to return to Raleigh, and so we wish him safe travels as he goes back. So again, thank you for his contributions, and we're going to move into introducing now our distinguished panel. I am going to introduce them individually and give them the high regard that they deserve. I hope after I make each person's introduction, you will join in and celebrate what they do for our great state and for the higher education systems that they lead. So I'm going to ask them to come out. They'll be seated, and then we'll proceed and give them an opportunity to speak, and then there'll be some moderated questions, and then we will, given the time, we'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions of them at the end, and we'll give you some instructions later about how we're going to do that. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the panelists. And so first, I would like to introduce and welcome to the stage Margaret Spellings, who's president of the University of North Carolina System. She assumed this position in March 2016, following a distinguished career in public service and education policy on the state and national levels. Among her leadership positions, she served as Chief White House Domestic Policy Advisor and U.S. Secretary of Education. She has recently launched a strategic plan, which I'm sure most of you have heard about, for the 17-campus system to help more North Carolinians gain access to higher education and strengthen ties throughout the education continuum. And we certainly at the community colleges appreciate that, President Spellings. She's also a graduate of the University of Houston and was awarded an honorary doctorate from her alma mater. So would you please join me in welcoming Margaret Spellings. Well, it really is my honor and privilege to introduce the next person. She has been acting president of the North Carolina Community College System now for, I think she would count 3 days. Jennifer HAYCOOD. Jennifer, as I said, is currently serving as the acting president of the North Carolina Community College System, which is comprised of 58 and I'm going to ad-lib here, 58 great community colleges serving more than 700,000 students across our state. She has been with the system office since 2008, serving as Executive Vice President and Chief of Staff, as well as Chief Financial Officer. She holds a master's degree in public policy from Duke, an undergraduate degree from Rice University, and between undergraduate and graduate degrees, she was a teacher for America Elementary School in inner city New Orleans. So would you please help welcome my acting president of the system, Jennifer HAYCOOD. And certainly, maybe we've saved the best for last. And so it's really my distinct honor again to introduce Tim Moore, who is Speaker of the North Carolina House of Representatives. Elected to the General Assembly in 2002, he is in his second term as House Speaker and represents Cleveland County. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he earned a law degree from Oklahoma City University and practices law at his own firm in Kings Mountain in his spare time, I'm sure. In 1997, at just age 26, I should say, he was the youngest person ever appointed to the UNC Board of Governors. So would you please welcome the Honorable Speaker Tim Moore. Well, thanks again to each of you for being here and being our distinguished panel, and so relax a little bit. We are going to invite each person to come up. They're going to make some introductory remarks. We're going to ask them to keep those brief. And then I'm going to moderate some questions. As we have them come up individually and they finish out, I'm going to move down and be in front of them so that we can certainly have more of a dialogue and conversation. And then, as I said, once we finish that portion, we are going to try to open it up for some Q&A. So, who to start with? I tell you what, President Spellings, would you lead us off with your comments? All right. Would you please welcome again Margaret Spellings?
Thank you, Dr. DEITEMEYER, for your hospitality this evening. Thank you to Paul Fulton for assembling us. It's an honor to be on the same program with Speaker Moore and Governor Cooper and you, my friend and colleague Jennifer. So thank you. Welcome, everybody. Just a food for thought, and maybe before you have your refreshments, is to think about what we in higher education are being asked to do today. Really something we've never done before and never had to do before. Today, 70% or more of the jobs require post-secondary education beyond high school. And what a high school diploma was in our parents' and grandparents' age, virtually ubiquitous, now that same standard, that same expectation for nearly all of our people has to be what our expectation of our public higher education system and our higher education system generally needs to provide. That's something we've really never been asked to do before. You could, in the good old days, make a good living in ways other than that, but that's not the case anymore. We also need to do that in ways that are very accessible, very affordable, a la carte even, so that people can come into and out of higher education throughout a lifetime, as Governor Cooper said, for jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So that is our calling, that is our charge. We can do it because we live in a state that has so treasured public higher education that it is ingrained in the history of this great state. It's what drew me here. This is a state that recognizes now and always has that higher education is the goose that can and will lay the golden eggs, not just for citizens individually, as we all have benefited from higher education, but for the good of this state, the fabric of the state, the civic life of this state, the economic growth of this state. And, that is endorsed every single day as I travel the state when I see things like the affirmation that the bond referendum, the high levels of passage, the great levels of support for this university, for the community colleges, and for a legislature that has invested heavily over the many decades into this goose that can and will and does lay the golden eggs of opportunity for this state and for the individuals in it. I'm privileged and proud to lead that enterprise, and I am looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Well, good evening. I want to thank Higher Education Works for the invitation to represent the North Carolina Community College system at this event. It's particularly important, I believe, that we do have community colleges represented here tonight. Too many people, when they think of higher education, immediately picture the residential baccalaureate degree granting institution, and yet nationwide, 40% of our undergraduates are enrolled in community colleges. So I think it's important that this reinforces that we have to need that broader concept of what higher education is, and that broader concept is essential if we're going to close the skills gap. I also want to just maybe begin by talking a little bit about a question a student asked me yesterday. I had a student ask me, what do you hope to accomplish at this forum tomorrow? And I thought, well, that's a good question. I should think about that. But I think that when I reflected, three things came to mind. I hope that when we all leave tonight, each and every one of us believes that we have a role in closing the skills gap. Educators and industry, we got to be connected at the hip. If we are not, we are going to threaten the relevance and the competitiveness of our institutions and our ability to move this state forward. Community members, we need you to challenge and change societal attitudes towards accepting that there are multiple paths after high school and towards the workforce, and that we value jobs, a variety of jobs, particularly those that require technical skills. I also hope that we all leave tonight with a sense of urgency about closing the skills gap. I don't think we can turn the news on any night and not realize that we have way too many citizens in our society who are seriously disaffected, disenfranchised, and believe that the economy has left them behind. So our American commitment to opportunity and economic mobility depends on us figuring out how to close this skill gap. And lastly, I hope that at the conclusion of this panel event and the Q&A session, that you walk away believing that there are concrete things that we can do to close this gap. This is a fixable problem. It will require investment, but we do have solutions, and we just need the political wherewithal to implement them. Thank you.
Good evening. I want to first start by recognizing two of my colleagues who made the trip down from Raleigh with me today. John Fraley, John, if you'll stand up, who represents Iredell County, and Craig Horn, who represents Union County. Thank y'all for being here. And if you follow education in North Carolina, you've heard these two names before, because these are two of the key leaders that we have in the legislature when it comes to all things education. These gentlemen, I can tell you, when I ask them their number one priority, it's education. When it's time for the budget and I say, what can I do for you? It's always more. So that's what I always hear from both of them. It's a real honor to be here tonight. I'm here because Paul Fulton told me I had to be here tonight. So Paul, I'm here. I appreciate what Higher Education Works is doing, not only with this forum, but around the state, and making sure that the business community and the broader audience is involved and engaged in what's happening with education in this state. You know, education used to be talked about as K through 12 and in the universities. But I think in recent years we found out it's really not about K. You got to start with pre-K, right? And one of the things I'm very proud of we did in this year's budget was we actually cut that wait list by half. I wish we could have gotten rid of all of it. There's next year a chance to do that, and I can tell you got two of my colleagues here, that's one of our priorities in the House, to see that we do that. You know, we know that a great start's critical. And when it comes to education, while it's a political issue, while it's all those things, it's a very personal issue. I have one son who's a senior just down the road at Kings Mountain High School. And I have my younger son is a sophomore at the Cleveland Early College High School. So he's at the community college. And of course, I'm a product of the University of North Carolina. So education from the beginning to the end is not only a political issue, it's something I'm living real time, particularly now with a senior who's wanting to apply for college and is in fact going through that process right now. If anybody's got any helpful hints on the SAT, please see me after this. But it's amazing to see the opportunities that are being afforded to our young people, all the way through. And I'm very proud of what North Carolina has done and is doing. But like many others, I realize that we have many challenges still to deal with. We have too many folks who are getting left behind, and we need to make sure we're dealing with that. We need to make sure that as we prepare folks for the four-year baccalaureate degree, that we also understand there are some kids who want to go into a trade, want to go into a vocation, so we can't neglect that as well. So the key is how you strike that balance. And those are things that we're working on, and as we talk this evening and as questions come up, I can shed a few other things. But I will, before I go sit down, leave you with this. Our state budget was roughly $23 billion. The amount that we spent on education this year was $13.1 billion. I submit to you the state's committed to education. It is, as it should be, the bulk of our state budget, and proud to have the opportunity to serve in the House. So on behalf of myself and my other 119 colleagues in the House, glad to be here this evening.
Well, thank you again for agreeing to be here tonight. And as I said, as we move in more to a conversation, we have some prepared questions, and I want to give you all an opportunity to speak to those things. And if we maybe get to a place that one of you wants to jump in on the other, we can do that as well. We'll just go. How about that? I like to do it that way. So again, thank you for being here. What an important conversation around higher education. And we're going to get started. And I think, Speaker Moore, if it's okay, since we introduced you last and let you go last, it would only be fair if I let you go first this time, right? Try to be equitable. So given all that you know about where North Carolina is today with respect to post-secondary education, where do we need to be and what should we prioritize to get there?
Well, we need to make sure that the opportunities are there for every student. And it all starts, I believe, with a good, solid pre-K program, with getting the kids when they're very young to get those foundational skills to be able to learn. We need to make sure that college is affordable and accessible. I'm very proud of the very affordable rates we have for tuition in North Carolina. I know President Spellings and I were talking about this subject the other day. Compared to UVA, we're cheaper for an out-of-state student than an in-state student in Virginia. And that's something that we want to continue to focus on. We also want to make sure that the community colleges are properly funded and provide there as well. You know, many students get their first 2 years of college there who are going to go on to get a four-year degree, and those who want to acquire a specific skill or vocation or training are doing that as well. I believe right now what coding, for example, is a skill that's very much in demand, and the community colleges have been very involved in seeing that done. The biggest thing we can do is make sure that we are providing great instructional personnel, which we are. One challenge we have is to make sure at the university level that we do better on faculty salaries. I know we have a lot of our faculty who are being poached and taken by other states, and we have the same issue with community colleges. While we did in this year's budget make significant increases for both teachers, faculty, and other personnel, we would like to have done more, and I would submit to you that it's a priority of ours. Our goal is to see that teacher pay and pay for all folks in education continues to increase. And I think Representative Horn and I were talking earlier, of all the states, we were the #1 in the country this year, the amount of increase that we did. Now, some got more, some got less, and so we're having to work through those pains of doing that. But I submit to you and want you to know, and this is folks of both parties, it isn't a partisan thing. It sometimes gets kind of kicked around that way around election time. But folks in both parties, in the House and the Senate, really do care about education and want to see that we're doing what we can to provide the resources. And I think that's critical, provide the resources, and you've got great leadership both at the K-12, at the universities, and the community colleges.
And we are doing really great on time, so I'm going to give both of you an opportunity. Is there something that either one of you see that we need to prioritize as we go forward that you'd like to comment on?
I'd just like to jump on and commend the legislature for the NC Promise program, which will begin next year in 2018-19, where 3 of our institutions, UNC Pembroke, Elizabeth City State, and Western Carolina, will literally reduce tuition to $500 a semester, commensurate or even potentially less than some of our community colleges, which I think comes as close to meeting that constitutional mandate of as free as practicable ever. And it is that we are a national leader on this. It'll be fascinating to see what that does for that value shopping student to get an excellent opportunity.
Ms. HAYCOOD, anything you think we should prioritize?
Well, I definitely think that we need to prioritize maintaining access and affordability. Obviously, the Promise program is one way of doing that. At the community college system, we're very proud of the fact that we charge $76 per credit hour for our resident students, so we are a great bargain, and we want to maintain low tuition so that we can maintain that access. However, we also need resources to help provide better student supports. We have a population that does not have a lot of experience navigating the higher education bureaucracy that, quite frankly, we have, and we have to provide better supports, helping students understand how to apply for financial aid. That's not an easy process. We still need to advocate on the federal level to simplify that, but we're not going to change that anytime soon. As a state, we have to help students better understand that our higher education opportunities are accessible to them, because we need to move the needle, move the attitude that everyone needs to have a post-secondary plan when they graduate.
Thank you. President Spellings, we've heard that more, quote, on-ramps are needed to give North Carolinians opportunities to pursue higher education opportunities. What are examples of some on-ramps we need, but perhaps don't have?
You know, I love that analogy of an on-ramp, because if you're, going onto the highway, you can kind of see your way clear, you speed up and you stay sped up. So it's something that I kind of like to think about as, what we ought to be doing for our students. Jennifer just mentioned a couple of examples. And these are things where our partnerships between our community colleges and the university, and even within the university, where we can help facilitate those pathways, better financial aid, more transfer of credit acceptance. We have some articulation agreements, but we can do more. Competency-based education, a la carte kind of 6- and 8-week programs, so that people are taking it in a convenient way for them, so that they're getting through efficiently and quickly. One value I think we don't talk enough about in higher education is time. We talk a lot about affordability and money, but I'd rather get out in 4 years than 6, because obviously the opportunity cost and the affordability. So we need to help students really get in and get out around things that they're passionate about in very efficient ways. And we can do more around financial aid, not just federally. We in the state of North Carolina run a lot of financial aid programs, and it's a crazy quilt. Our credit acceptance policies between and among institutions, with advanced placement and other things like that. If you're first generation and you're trying to navigate this, it darn sure doesn't look like that on-ramp to a highway where you're speeding up and staying sped up, and we can do better.
Well, and I'm going to give Ms. HAYCOOD a chance. I'm sure you want to talk about on-ramps, and then Speaker Moore perhaps will give you a chance to think about it. But I know at Central Piedmont we still have over 60% of our students who are first generation. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about on-ramps and we talk about those wraparound services that we need to maybe plug some resources in, Ms. HAYCOOD, what about the on-ramps? And do you have something you want to add?
Absolutely. When we talk about on-ramps, one thing that we talk a lot about in our system is awarding credit when credit is due. Transfer is an example of that we've talked about a lot in the past, and is maybe a concept that people are familiar with, but there are other opportunities for us to award credit when credit is due. One initiative that we've been working on collaboratively with UNC that I'm very excited about is that we are developing a systematic policy for awarding credit for military training and military experience. Yeah. So if you were a military medic, we have analyzed what skills you received through that training and through that experience, and what credit can we already grant you so that you don't have to repeat it. Speaking back to the time, the biggest waste for a student, not only for money and time, is repeating coursework that they've already mastered. So that's an example. We have a concept that I hope everyone is familiar with, and if you're not, we need to educate you about, is creating stackable credentials so that you can perhaps come get a industry certification if that's what you need immediately, and that you can enroll in that on a short-term basis. But then, can we then take those skills, award credit where credit is due, and have another on-ramp to your associate degree that then later may be an on-ramp to a baccalaureate degree. So we have to have these aligned pathways where students can, like you said, on-ramp, but if they need to exit for the workforce, have a child, take care of family, but then there's a path to get back on. There was an interesting statistic that the National Center for Education Statistics published recently, that 2/3 of baccalaureate completers attend more than one higher education institution, and 1 in 5 attend multiple, like 4 or 5 institutions. We have to have these opportunities so that when people are going from 2-year to 4-year, from 4-year to 4-year, from 4-year to 2-year, that all of that, those credits are not being wasted in translation as we're moving from sector to sector.
So Speaker Moore, I want to give you an opportunity. We've been talking about on-ramps, and we've heard from the higher ed leaders, but we also know that there's some policy and maybe some fiscal. So when you think about on-ramps outside of the higher ed lens, is there anything that you'd offer?
Well, one of the examples I mentioned earlier, my youngest son's in the early college high school. And this is a program where a kid will graduate high school but already have their first 2 years of college done. And as somebody who's going to be paying the freight on college, I really like that. And I'll tell you, a lot of parents like that. And it's a very seamless process. When these children, when they finish their high school education and they have this preparation, it's not only good for the families, good for the student, but it also saves the state money. And so that's another part that we like, is the legislators saving the money. But it's got great results. My question is, why can't we expand it? Why can't we do more with it? Because where it's happening with the career and promise classes, it's showing great results, and I want to see us continue to expand that.
We'll get back to you on that.
All right. I had a feeling you would.
Yeah.
I got lots of witnesses.
Yeah. It's a great program. It really is.
It is, and it does amazing things for young people. So Ms. Haygood, we're up to you. And so to meet the job demands of the future, the Lumina Foundation projects that 60% of U.S. citizens must meet post-secondary education attainment certifications by 2025. North Carolina is currently at 45.9%. What needs to happen for North Carolina to meet the goal of 60%?
A lot. A lot. Clearly, for us to meet that goal, not only do we need to increase attainment rates, we need to increase the number of students getting into the pipeline to begin with. That starts with, we have to emphasize career exploration and developing career goals early in a student's education. Right now, North Carolina does not have a definitive, high quality, easy to access career information portal that all students have access to, so that we understand what jobs are available and what education we have available to train them and to qualify for those jobs. We were very fortunate that the General Assembly a couple years ago provided us $1 million to start what was called a career coach program. These are community college employees embedded in the high school who do counseling students, specifically helping them to identify their career goals and to identify programs to support those goals. That program, in the first full year of implementation, we had 28 coaches across the state, which are just a few people, but we impacted over 12,000 students. This year we have 55 across the state. So we need to ramp up those opportunities where we are actively talking with students, helping them figure out where they want to go. Because that's part of the problem, is students don't really know what they want to do, right? You hear that all the time. So we got to help them make good, informed decisions.
So let me interrupt you.
Okay.
Because I didn't get a round of applause on those statistics, and that's impactful. $1 million investment, right? 28 to 55, and we impacted how many people?
Over 12,000 students.
12,000 students now know about careers that they didn't know before. That deserves thank you to this continuum. Absolutely. I know that we're having a conversation, but you can join in. Even more in a little bit. So I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but Ms. Haygood, I know that you would want folks to really marinate in that a little bit. So.
But once we help students identify where they want to go, we need to make sure that we do have these aligned pathways where students need a map. They need to know, how do you get from A to B? I think once upon a time we had more of a philosophy of cafeteria style, let students take whatever they want to take, but research shows that we need to help them make sure that they know exactly what those requirements are and which of those have they achieved. So I would love to see every student in higher education or even in education have a dashboard so that they can clearly see how they're making progress. And I think having that progress is motivating.
So President Spellings will give you a chance. We're talking about moving the needle on the almost 46% to the 60% by 2025. And I heard Ms. Haygood talk a lot about intentionality.
And one of the things we've been saved by is all the immigration that has come into cities like this one that has really lifted the boat here. And we need to do a much better job on behalf of the people of North Carolina, in particular rural communities. And we have made that a real focal point of our strategic plan in the university. And I love Jennifer's idea of the dashboard and the expectation, really. People ask me, if you could wave your magic wand, what would it be? It would be an expectation in every single town, city, and burg in this state that every one of those kids needs a game plan that includes higher education, just like we expect for high school. And so I think there's an ethic that we have to overcome that, you know, if your child leaves and goes to Charlotte, they're gone for good. And that parts of North Carolina will die if we do that. And it's not the case, and it can't be the case. And so, you know, as simplistic as it sounds, just raising our expectation that is our clarion call, that every single one of them. So a commitment and a belief that we can do that for everyone. Yes, it takes investment, but I really believe we can be a lot smarter and more efficient about how we use resources. And the one that I'm harping on lately is, you know, the legislature has invested a lot in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, teacher training, paying for tests for disadvantaged students. And then we in the university say, well, maybe so, maybe no. Maybe it's a 4 at App and a 3 at Charlotte, and so this crazy quilt of navigation that we're asking first generation students is unrealistic, and that's on us, and we need to fix it.
Speaker Moore?
Well, I think we just continue to provide the resources you are doing. You know the challenges, and I know that Representative Horn and his committee has really looked toward educational transformation, and one of those things is making sure that the opportunities are laid out effectively and that a person going in has a game plan, not just to show up for college and see what happens, but a game plan, a finite ending period to try to get 4-year graduation rates, to increase retention. And so we're going to continue supporting what you all are doing. You all are the one boots on the ground dealing with that, though, but we're going to be there with the resources.
So Speaker Moore, I'm going to follow up. President Spellings actually set up you beautifully for the next question. And this is one, I spent 7 years in a rural place as president of another community college in our system. And so the next one really is about how we encourage North Carolinians living in those rural communities to embrace higher education, to know it's the possibility, not of just the way out, right? But to continue to be embedded in their community, to make things happen, to create jobs, to make those livable places that everybody wants to go. That makes a more vibrant North Carolina. So how do we do that? How do we get them to embrace higher education as a way to embed and make North Carolina better?
Well, as someone who lives in a rural area in the big city of Kings Mountain, about 45 minutes west of here, while we're close to Charlotte, we're very much a rural area. About when you get out of the traffic, when you're almost in Cleveland County now on the interstate. But that's both good and bad, right? That means we have a lot of growth. I believe it's frankly a multi-pronged approach to dealing with rural North Carolina. And it is something that we, even outside of education, that we deal with. You can look and Charlotte's doing great. Greensboro's doing really well. Raleigh's doing well. Durham, the urban areas. But we've really got some areas in the state that are really challenged. I'm very fortunate that our area here, we're doing pretty well right in this area. But if you go up into northeast North Carolina, it's not so great. It's a much more bleak picture where you have true loss of population. Sometimes the kids who are going and getting a college degree don't come back. In fact, statistically, most of those kids don't come back. And that is not a recipe for continued success. So how do we do that? Well, number one, we need to make sure that from an economic development standpoint, that we are providing the resources not only for the urban areas to thrive, but also for the rural areas to thrive. We also need to make sure that there's great health care, right? I mean, if you're a family and you're moving to a community and there's not a hospital nearby, that's an issue, right? Anybody disagree with that? I wouldn't think anybody would. So we need to make sure that health care is there. And then, of course, education. What happens, unfortunately, is sometimes, particularly when it comes to the schools, the K-12, is the areas that are the most impoverished tend to have some of the lower performing schools. And so sometimes it's difficult to get teachers there, and it's just a spiraling effect. And we understand that, and we are investing more money in trying to get resources there to recruit teachers to teach in these low wealth areas, and to put the resources in to make these schools succeed. Because when a company is looking, right, when a large company is looking to locate in a state, and when an executive is looking to move to an area, and they have kids, what's the first thing they're going to ask? This is where y'all can, what are they going to ask about?
Their schools.
Their schools. They want to know that. And so that's one of the things we need to continue to invest in. So I can tell you that with respect to rural students, I believe within North Carolina, every person lives within, a 30-minute drive of a community college? So substantial investment of the community colleges around the state. The universities have a great footprint. And for those who are far away, we have the online and the distance learning opportunities where folks can maintain a career, maintain a family, and still obtain a college degree and even an advanced degree beyond that. We want to continue investing in that. We want to make sure those resources are there at those early years when it comes to the pre-K, when it comes to K-12, when the community colleges, with the university, and making sure that the seamless process is there. And that's what we're going to have, because we can't have two North Carolinas, folks. We can't have a prosperous urban North Carolina that is leaving behind a rural North Carolina. That just won't work. That is not sustainable. And so we've really got to invest. And the good news is, I can tell you, that a number of the manufacturers that you've read in the paper are looking at North Carolina, are actually looking at the rural areas. And if you look at a lot of our rural areas, we're seeing great improvement. But that's going to require continued investment, both from the state level, but also at the community level, and education is a key part of that.
Ms. Haygood, I know we have a lot of community colleges that are in the rural areas, and I would be remiss, given my history, if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we need to do to make sure we embrace higher education in those communities and continue to support what's going on there, and then President Spellings will give you a chance as well.
So, of course, the jobs is obviously key. If we don't have jobs in our rural areas, people are effectively going to be forced to move. But to the extent there are jobs, we do need to make sure that we have high-quality educational opportunities in those rural areas. We know that when we train nurses in the rural areas, they stay and serve the rural areas. Yeah. We know that we have a great partnership at Richmond Community College with UNC Pembroke, where we teach the first couple of years of the baccalaureate degree, then have UNC Pembroke faculty come to Richmond County and teach a cohort. Those teachers stay in Richmond County. So we have to make sure that those opportunities are accessible. We do have online, and the North Carolina Community College system has historically been on the forefront of distance learning, but we also need to make sure our rural areas have broadband access. Right. Because we don't have broadband access. We can't take advantage of all the resources that we have.
We want to advance the society, but we can't get beyond what the society will be able to tolerate in order to become advanced, right? President Spellings?
Gosh, I mean, Jennifer took the great examples, and I mean that we've said it, I think, and that is expectations, resourcing and pathways, investing locally in places like Brody and the two examples that she gave, so that people are incented to stay home and see an opportunity for their future in their communities, through teaching, through nursing, through manufacturing, through coding, there are lots of opportunities in rural North Carolina. We need to point that out.
Well, I want to give the next question to you, Madam President, and we've seen a lot of public opinion polls over the years that show a growing divide in perceptions about higher education. We would probably agree about that. Yeah. What do you think contributes to that skepticism about colleges and universities?
Well, the most troubling one recently was a poll done by the Pew Foundation that found among Republicans that now, and this happened in a 2-year period, that there was a shift from people thinking that higher education was part of the solution, part of our future, part of opportunity, now to seeing it as a detriment to that they believe that higher education in America is eroding prosperity and whatnot. And I think people think that because of some of the points Jennifer made, where people feel disinfected, left behind. We've sold this belief that higher education is a pathway and then priced people out of it often. And so they think, well, that's not for me. I get it, but how do I make that personal for me? I think they also see on campuses around the country, and for those of us who are in the public square, this is not an easy time to be there. This is where our intense political debates that we're having right now really play out. And so when speakers go to college campuses and are spit at and shouted at and beat up, that makes moms and dads in Kings Mountain say, what the heck? And it's and I think they often see maybe not a reflection of their own values, beliefs, and orthodoxy reflected in American higher education. And so I think, Chancellor Fulton and I just made a trip to Princeton to look at an institute there, the Madison Project on American Institutions and Ideals, which is a fascinating place that really talks about civic discourse and things that bind us together and our first principles, those fundamental beliefs that I think often have maybe gone missing a bit in American higher education, especially at our flagships and in our elite institutions. And so we need to work on that. We need to bring that balance back. We need to see all points of view in American higher education so that we can rebut this erroneous belief that higher education is part of the problem.
So Ms. Haycood, you spoke earlier at the podium about changing the narrative. I'm using my words, not yours, but really the perception about what it means to be a community college in this continuum and that there's more than one path. And do you think that maybe that helps contribute to the skepticism, or changing the narrative can help improve this kind of skepticism that's going on with our colleges and universities?
I do, and I think that part of changing that narrative goes back to the point I was making about being attached at the hip with industry. Because I also think that when people have gone to higher education and then come home and move back in with mom and dad and can't get a job, they're wondering you didn't get the knowledge, skills, and abilities that our employers need. And I do think that we need all levels of educators, everything from administrators down to faculty, to be engaged with our business and industry to better understand what they're looking for so that we can make sure that we're giving the skills. And that doesn't mean just technical skills, because liberal arts education is important to developing critical thinking. And no matter what job you're in, we were with representatives from the construction industry on Friday, and they need critical thinking skills. And so it spans the spectrum. But I do think that we need to improve that connection. And I think a strategy that we all need to be considering expanding on is work-based learning, so that students have opportunities to both be in the workplace and earn academic credit. And apprenticeships is one opportunity. We're very excited about the fact that the General Assembly had the wisdom to move the apprenticeship program to the community college system this past session, and we're looking forward to effectuating that transfer and growing that program. But there's other opportunities. There are internships, the old co-op model, but we need to, I think, expand opportunities for work-based learning.
So Speaker Moore, from a policy sense, do you have some sense of how we improve perhaps this skepticism that's taking a little bit of hold, as President Spelling says, about our colleges and universities? Because you spoke so eloquently that we have a great system, flagship institutions, and we're one of the best in the country. So how do we in North Carolina just make sure that skepticism doesn't take hold here?
Well, I was on a college campus a few months ago and actually saw one of these protests. People were yelling at each other. It was getting wound up. And somebody looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh." I said, I feel at home. This is like being in the legislature. I don't know what the problem was. And Craig Horn was even there when it happened. Really, I think panels like this and the work of Higher Education Works are key to getting the word out of the great things that are happening in our university. When I go talk to folks all around the state, what I'm hearing is, for the most, really support for the university when folks know and they understand. It's not only about, of course, education, but the research and development. Look at the dramatic growth of the RTP, but for the universities, that wouldn't be there. Right. Look at, I've always said, if you want to see what spin-off companies that create high-paying, high-tech jobs, SAS is Exhibit A. That was started, Dr. Goodnight right there at NC State, moved on, developed this, employs thousands of people. When we get into the high tech, I think the comment was made earlier that Many of the jobs, the governor mentioned this, many of the jobs that folks will have during their lifetime now are jobs that we don't even know about. Nobody's talking about. I mean, just think back 30 years ago. Would you have ever thought you would have something like an iPhone? Nobody ever thought of that. That was in the movies and stuff. Remember the James Bond movie where he'd pull the thing out and make the picture of it? It was just science fiction. So what's amazing to me are the things that are yet to come. Well, universities, in terms of the research, in terms of the education that's happened there, the studies, they're leading the way. If you look at any kind of development of technology, you can just about always trace it back to higher education being a big part of that. And of course, what's the pipeline to get those students there? It's starting out all the way from pre-K all the way up. So it's a long-term investment. And I think when folks understand and see what the payoff is by a great university system, they support it. I mean, if you went back and tried to single out in North Carolina, our economy, whether it's biotech, high tech, you name it, it all comes back to where the universities are. And I know Paul and I had an opportunity to see at UNC School for the Arts the virtual reality thing, where there's did you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a really neat thing. I know hundreds of you are going to show up at School of the Arts wanting to do this thing, but it's some of the neatest technology out of virtual reality, where it's pretty amazing. They have a 2x4 board on the floor just like this. You put this helmet on and you put some earphones on. Now, bear in mind, I've got teenagers, so I see video games. But this is way beyond that, I promise. And you put this thing on, and you go up an elevator on virtual reality, and the door opens. And what happens, Paul? You walk the plank. I walk the plank. Paul didn't walk. But what happens is you walk on this plank, and it feels real, and it looks real, and you're the whole time you having to tell yourself this isn't real, but it feels like it. Well, so that sounds like a neat thing to go do and look at, but what does that mean in real life? Well, it could change shopping, for example. You could go in and decide if you went into a Lowe's or if you went online and wanted to look and see, what would it look like if I did this? You could put this thing on and look around, and it's like you're there. So it has great commercial application beyond just the entertainment factor. Well, our universities are the cutting edge of doing these kinds of things. So that's when you get that word out, and certainly what the community colleges are doing, not only educating students, but worker retraining. Numerous examples of where folks have worked in textiles, right? They're out of a job because textiles are closed. They need to go get a job where they've got to use a computer. Some haven't done it. How do they get that experience? The community colleges. So when folks have an understanding and see what's happening, they support it, and we need to help get the word out, and I'm glad that Higher Education Works is being a big part of that.
Well, I'm going to give you the last question at this point, Ms. Haygood, and then I'm going to ask our audience to start thinking about if they have questions, and we'll start that part of our dialogue in just a minute. But it's become more and more difficult to define a typical college student. Many students today are older and have families, but in the last few years in community colleges, we've seen that number go down because of the success of Career and College Promise and the economy changing. Some work during the day, some couple jobs. What options are available for these students to earn post-secondary certification, develop the skills necessary for tomorrow's jobs, and what more can we do? You talked a little bit about this earlier, but can we deep dive on that a little bit more about what do you think we should be doing and how can we change that?
So the first thing we need to do is stop making policy with the assumption that all college students are first-time, full-time, right out of high school students. The way we have historically measured success, how our financial aid programs are structured, how residency is determined. We have a host of policies that were developed with the lens of recent high school full-time attendance. And that is basically almost not the norm now. So we have to change that mindset when we are making policies. I've mentioned before that we, the community college system, have used distance learning. That is a key opportunity. Competency-based education, which President Spellings mentioned before, I think that is an important trend and strategy that we need to implement. And very proud that Central Piedmont Community College is leading a consortium of colleges to develop our first fully competency-based education program for associate degree in IT that we've been working on and are close to completing, and I think that's really an important strategy. We've got to figure out how to have structured learning opportunities but are more flexible, and we've got to figure this out because, quite honestly, That is why proprietary schools and the for-profit sector has been as popular as they have been. They have been more flexible, they have been provided better supports, and quite honestly, they've sort of eaten our lunch, and we've got to change that because we know that we are so focused and have the student truly at heart. But there's one thing that I think often gets lost is when it comes to the non-traditional student, we frequently are talking about how we deliver the instruction, but we also have to figure out how do we deliver the student supports because these folks are working. We don't want them to have to take off work to go see their counselor in the middle of the day. And I've heard some stories recently, that's what folks have had to do. So I'm not sure how to crack that nut, but we really need to think about alternative ways not only to deliver instruction, but to deliver student supports.
So,
Great answer.
So I want to move us to the next segment, but I heard Ms. Haycood mention something really important, and that is the change of policy for our institutions, because it's a little old school. In terms of, and so would you be a supporter of changing some policies if we could come up with a better framework?
Absolutely, and Jennifer, and we're about to launch here in a couple of weeks a real effort across the continuum from PK through the university to really get our act together better on these transitions. And we welcome it, we embrace it, and we can do better, and we will. The other thing I want to say quickly is, we're in the era of big data, and we have so underinvested in understanding our own enterprise.
Absolutely.
And our ability to serve our students better and pick up patterns where if you're taking these two classes together, you're going to wash out and drop out. I mean,
Predictive analytics.
We need to use those predictive analytic measures, and we're going to have to invest and come to the legislature as we did last session. Thank you, John Fraley, for some ability to do that.
I would like to echo the need to invest in technology in higher education. That was one of my only other points we hadn't hit on, so thank you very much for bringing that up.
And sometimes those are not tangible returns on investment, but they really are as we get them up and running. So I hear we might be coming to you with some policy and some technology issues. So we're just giving you a heads up. So we're going to, do you want to respond to that? Or
We already did 11 million.
We're
Some more, I should
We're
say.
waiting to hear more great ideas.
We're here, okay. I love that attitude. Okay. Well, thank you. You guys have been terrific. And I want to move us now to really getting some feedback and maybe some questions from our audiences. I'm going to take this side of the room, but I will not be able to do this on my own. So I want to ask one of my colleagues from the University of, from UNC Charlotte to come up, Dr. Ellen McIntyre. She's the Dean of the Cato College of Education at the university. Prior to joining the university, she's held senior positions at North Carolina State and the University of Louisville. She's a former elementary school teacher, and she's received an undergraduate and master's degree from the University of Northern Kentucky and doctorate from the University of Cincinnati. And again, a great colleague over there at our wonderful regional institution, UNC Charlotte. So thank you. Would you please welcome her? She's going to help us. And my team here knows that we do this often. I go off page. I saw to my left over here some great community folks, but also some other partners at UNC Charlotte. So hello to you as well. And please stand so we can recognize you, please, from the Chancellor's office. Absolutely. And I think it was said earlier, but just for everybody's edification, the Chancellor had a big event on campus tonight, and I know he wishes he could be here as well, but he's attending to great business as well. So we are going to move about. If you have a question, if you will, we're going to try to do this in an orderly fashion. If you will raise your hand, we will try to come to you, and we'll go 1 and 2 and back. How about that? And I'm going to be watching our time, so I want to be mindful of where we are in the program. Let me do that real quick as we begin to start taking question 1. So we have a few minutes. So, Dr. McIntyre? Okay, and if you will stand and just maybe give us your first name.
Okay, my name is Rodney, and I do have one concern, and this has to do with the $400 million that has been put forth on vouchers for students to the private schools and to for-profit schools. If that can be done for those schools, why can't we have vouchers for our community college students?
Okay. All right.
Well, So what we do, of course, with the community colleges, we fund that. We fund that on an FTE. I believe we have one of the more affordable community college tuitions in the country, and I believe it's something we need to continue investing in. With respect to any kind of educational tax credits, those are pretty narrowly limited. There are income thresholds. They were originally started, of course, to help disabled students who might need more hands-on and more direct education they might otherwise be able to get. But we've continued doing that, and I think that honestly, when it comes to education, there's not a one-size-fits-all, and we need to try to make sure we're taking care of K-12 as well as the community colleges.
All right, and we have a question over here.
Speaker Moore, my name is Bruce. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at UNC Charlotte. And the UNC need-based grant, lottery scholarship, and I'm sure the community college grant are very important to what we do, and they help fill in the gap for many of our lower income and middle income families. The amount of the UNC need-based grant has been fixed for a couple years now, has not increased. So for us, it becomes a race. I get in a race with ECU and the state to make sure our FAFSAs get in earlier, because it is a finite amount of money and it's first come, first serve. And the state agency, being fiscally responsible, will shut down the program when they see that the money's been exhausted. So for students who file after the cutoff date, they don't get funding even though they may be eligible. So is there any talk of increasing that amount of money? We would love to see that anytime a student files during the year that they would be able to receive the grant. But thank you for your support for the grant. We really need it and need more of it.
Well, I know that this year we increased the funding for that. I don't recall the exact percentage, but it was quite significant. And so, and I would say we would continue to do that, and as enrollment numbers are there and as the resources demanded, we'll be there to respond.
Can I add quickly to that? You know, when we reduce tuition, it's like peanut butter. Everybody gets it. But one of the things that I'm really struck by, and we'll be talking with the Board of Governors about this next meeting, is, you know, we can be very strategic with financial aid, and I know you've heard story after story with just $1,000 or $1,500 can get students. In fact, Phil DuBois was telling me the other day about a program what they had here at UNCC with 75 students with a little bit of money who had 90 credit hours or more, and they got out with that. So we using financial aid very strategically. We talk a lot about tuition. It's important, don't get me wrong. But that super strategic investment is really useful.
And I would just add to that I recently read an article about a consortium of universities outside of North Carolina who were really intentionally looking at how to increase completion among low-income and minority students. And the completion grant idea was one of the three things that really came out. And for our students, a lot of times, those grants need to be provided to fix the car when it breaks down, or emergency babysitting, or, you know, those types of life happens episodes.
Flexibility.
And so I hope that if you have a local community college foundation that has a completion grant program, please contribute, because you don't know how important those contributions are to completion.
Dr. McIntyre, do you have a question over there?
Yes. My name is Rosemary, and I'm a teacher here at CPCC. I've been here for a long time. When I first came, the admissions people had a sticker on their computers. Well, they were not. They were just typewriters, but anyway. Almost no, they were computers. But it said, remember, these were for admissions. Remember, you're here because you're serving the people that you are admitting, and that's your service, and that's why you would have a job if there weren't students. Well, you won't have a university or a college if you don't have teachers. Right. And we have moved from having, when I first came in '79, the part-time teachers were under 30%. Now, my figures are my own, but I think it's around 70 to 80% in our colleges and universities here in North Carolina, let alone the rest of the country. And my question is, when are those part-time teachers going to get some benefits as part-time teachers? There are models already in Canada where they manage, if you need part-time teachers because you need to shift them around, fine. But the legislature has to give us some money. There's no raises.
Can you comment?
You know, what we're trying to do, of course, when it comes to universities and community colleges, is to raise all of the faculty salaries. I haven't frankly dealt with the situation on part-time versus full-time. You mentioned that to me as the first discussion anyone's had with me on it. So glad to have further conversation. And if there's an issue there, of course, President Haygood's here. Glad to work on that.
Okay, we have another question over here. Hi.
My name is Patsy Montesinos, and I am a student leader here at CPCC. And when looking at schools, when I was trying to figure out what school I wanted to transfer, I was considering Chapel Hill, Queens, and different other NC universities. But I found out that many universities have different courses required for for the same major. So it was difficult for me to wanting to apply to different universities at a time with different requirements because I don't have the time to take all the courses. So is there anything that we're doing to make that a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say this crazy quilt of pathways. So if you want to be a nurse at Greensboro, why does it look substantially different than being a nurse at ECU or whatever? That's less true in the professions that have licensure like teaching and nursing. But we can do a much better job of understanding what credits are going to transfer, credit for when credit is due, to use Jennifer's verbiage, pathways around, truth in advertising, what are the course requirements, and we need to be more transparent about it, and we need to do it earlier. You shouldn't have known that, in high school, not, on the eve of registration. And so we can use the SEAA apparatus, the state financial aid operation, to really do a better job of kind of customer service with people like you who are trying to, you know what you want to do, and you want to do it as quickly, efficiently, and affordably as possible. And so that you found your place here.
Dean McIntyre.
Hello, my name is A.O. Fleming, and this question is for you, Mr. Speaker. You spoke earlier regarding the NC Promise program, and I'm a graduate of Elizabeth City State and attended the College of the Albemarle, so just to let you know in advance. So I know that the legislature has provided funding for at least the first 2 years of that program, so students who are enrolling in fall 2018 will be able to benefit. But what is the legislature hasn't revealed its plans or how it will continue to fund that program 2 years after. So my concern is, what are the answers that we should provide to students who are going to enroll this fall? Will they have that $500 reduction or $500 price point in-state for tuition, $2,500 out-of-state? That's really important to hundreds of people enrolling at those 3 institutions.
I can tell you that it's my intention that we continue this program, and I'd like to see us even expand it. It's probably one of the greatest things that we're doing for access. I'm just curious, what kind of response are you seeing there?
Great. At Elizabeth City State, there's really going to be a benefit, as I'm sure President Spellings can tell you, in increasing our overall enrollment, because I'm from that rural area and we are challenged. The brain drain, for lack of a better point, as a former citizen of that area, we leave because of the industry, President Haygood, which you mentioned earlier. So it's a great opportunity, we think, for our students. We're seeing an increase in interest, certainly, but the challenge is just, will there be funding available? Those in-state and out-of-state students are saying, why enroll with the possibility of it changing on me in the middle of my 4-year degree?
Well, and that's certainly a reasonable question. My answer is I certainly support continuing it, and we're wanting to see what the results are. We're wanting to see if it's actually producing the results that we believe it will and that we believe it has, of allowing students to come in and afford it who otherwise wouldn't, who are actually completing their degree, graduating, not going in as debt as much. And so we want to see that happen. And as it continues to work, I think it's a great example we can continue to build on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the legislature, $51 million was a major investment for this coming year, and I'm confident that there'll be many enthusiastic supporters of this, Mr. Speaker.
Right, and we have a question over here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Susan Harden, and I'm a professor in the College of Education at UNC Charlotte, and I teach the first class that students take in the College of Education when they want to be a teacher. And what I'm finding is that I'm having fewer and fewer students, even though we have a fantastic program at UNC Charlotte. And what my students tell me is that teacher pay is just not adequate. They can go into nursing or engineering or computer science, and the fact of the matter is that there are options. So my question to you is, number one, what can we do about the pipeline? Number two, what can we do about teacher pay, and is even targeting to be within the top 25 when my students are graduating and going to Texas and South Carolina to teach? Is that enough of a goal to attract students when their options among other careers are so much better?
Well, I'll take that one. We have really invested very heavily in raising teacher pay now for 6 solid years. And now I think where we're really doing well is on new teachers. We've raised that, consistently raised it, getting the average up to $50,000. There's been some challenges where the feedback I've heard, I've got plenty of relatives who are teachers. Where I've heard is, the complaint I've heard is those who've been in the system longer saying, hey, why are the newer teachers getting a bigger raise than those who've been here longer? And so that's a fair question. That's something that we are continuing to invest in. The other thing I hear about is, well, I'm getting a raise, but my insurance premiums went up. And my insurance premiums are more than that. And again, that creates an issue. So that's something that we're going back looking at as well. Of course, we don't set those. Those are set through an actuarial table under the Treasurer's office. But we have continually invested. As I mentioned earlier, North Carolina made the single greatest pay increase for educators in last year's budget than any state in the country. Now, somebody could say, well, yeah, because we're in the bottom tier of those schools. But, we are where we are, but we're working to get those up, and we are improving, and we are increasing. But you can't, it's like any other thing. It's not a problem that happened overnight, and you're not going to fix it overnight. And it takes a long-term approach, and that's what we're doing. But we have a finite amount of money that we're putting in. We're seeing actually more revenue coming in even by reducing tax rates. We think that's encouraging more growth in the state. The numbers are there to bear that out, and as we continue to experience surplus, we're going to invest that in education. And if you look at our budgets, if you look at the money we've put into K-12, we put into community colleges, we've put into the universities, we're spending record amounts in our state's history, and we're going to continue to do that.
Sorry.
I was just going to add one quick thing. The legislature also restored the Teaching Fellows program this year, which we're in the design phase of, to allow teachers to have their loans forgiven with public service, and that will help make your money go farther.
The other thing that I would like to add is, in addition to those strategies, we also, talking about the pipeline, need to provide more affordable options for teacher preparation. And the community colleges, we're working on developing an associate degree in education, which is a transfer degree specifically designed for teacher preparation. We plan to pilot with NC State in the next year and hope that we learn from there and perhaps can scale that, because, again, we have to have the value proposition for students, and students aren't going to go into a lot of debt to have a job that only pays so much.
Right.
Dean McIntyre.
Hi, my name is Kay Livesey. I'm a beneficiary of higher education, public higher education in North Carolina, and now serve as faculty at another institution at Western Carolina University. I really appreciate your comments tonight. I think back on my education at Chapel Hill, and I think about, you guys have talked a lot about job skills, preparing people for jobs and careers. But when I think back on what I got, there was other soft skills and a growth mindset and the need to be an engaged citizen. And I wonder if you guys would mind commenting on what you think about the role of higher education in educating citizens, in doing things beyond just preparing people for jobs of today or jobs of tomorrow, which are going to require skills to learn how to learn, not just content delivery or a technical skill. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about the role of higher education in helping to educate citizens in a society and what we need to do in that regard.
I'll start. I think it's a central part of our mission. You cannot separate it at all from preparing people to be successful in a career. That's certainly important. We don't want to minimize it. But at our core essence is preparing people to be good citizens, to be good parents, to be good role models, to contribute, and to grow over a lifetime. And, when it gets set up as this binary kind of liberal arts or technical skills, that's just so wrong. And, we talk about that a lot. And I want to give a shout out to Representative Horn, who thinks a lot about these issues and really wants us to work as a university and across this continuum on just that very value, because I think it's really eroded and it's so important to our future.
I would just add that the soft skills absolutely are important, and that's not mutually exclusive from wanting to have what employers need too, because if you can't be a good citizen, you're not going to be a good employee. In our system, we've actually developed a group from our colleges who is specifically looking at how do we improve embedding soft skills into our curriculum. And I'm very curious to see what that group and committee puts together, but it's definitely front and center for us as well.
So we have 2 people waiting, and I'm going to check our time, and we'll see if we can go to the other side of the room, if we will.
Hello, my name is Helen Amaro. I'm a student leader here at CPCC, and I'm also an activist for in-state for DACA students. My question was, what are your views on DACA students, and do you plan on also making higher education affordable for them as well?
I have been outspoken on this issue for a long time, since my service in the Bush administration and working at the national level, and come from a state where in-state tuition is provided to so-called dreamers. And so I'm part of a coalition that is urging the Congress, as Paul Ryan and others are doing, to find ways to take action within this 6-month period so that we can settle this uncertainty and really chart the way forward. My heart and I just have a real belief in DACA students. I've met many of them, and after we've invested in them in our K-12 systems, many of them high flyers who are pursuing higher education, I think it's very smart of us to continue to invest in them in higher education.
What I would say from the legislative standpoint, the state level, we're really subject to what the feds do on this. And frankly, I wish the federal government would fix this one way or another. It's very frustrating for us as state policymakers because we have to comply with what those federal laws are. But my heart's with you.
Hello, Ellie Finney from North Carolina A&T State University. I'm a faculty there, and I'm also AAAS Lemelson Invention Ambassador. I have a question about innovation ecosystem, and I start with saying Kaufman Index of Startup Activity in North Carolina is 0.09 and been a steady, no improvement over the past few years. And I know role of higher education, we are talking about preparing students to get a job, but what about those who want to create a job? And the question is, how you think the higher education cross-paths with innovation ecosystem, and what is your plan to improve it, and where is our goal? Where are we gonna be in 2025 in terms of innovation ecosystem? Are we gonna be next Silicon Valley?
We can be. We punch way above our weight already in this state with drawing down federal research dollars. We're number 5. We're about in the mid-40s when it comes to faculty pay. The taxpayers of North Carolina are getting a great value from this university in that respect. And we are creating incredible innovation and drawing down billions of dollars in federal research investment. So this is an area, Speaker Moore mentioned the RTP. Without that RTP, we would not be this vibrant economy, and it is because of far-sighted leaders in our history and the strength of the university to support that.
Well, you guys have been terrific. Would you please give them a round of applause? I want to also thank our audience members for their thoughtful questions. It's hard to get up and speak sometimes and look for answers, and so I appreciate that they had the courage to do that and you were willing to stay and take open forum questions. That is very much appreciated in our community, and I really want to say thank you for that, rather than just do some prepared questions and just have an open dialogue with me as a moderator. So I think all of you two are to be commended for that. Well, it's now my pleasure to introduce Paul Fulton, who co-chairs the Board of Higher Education Works, who's again hosting and putting on this great event this evening. He is a UNC Chapel Hill graduate, and you may know him as the past president of Sara Lee Corporation, chairman of Bassett Furniture, dean of the Keenan Flagler Business School, UNC Chapel Hill trustee, Winston-Salem State trustee, and UNC Board of Governors member. I will tell you that's an amazing record of leadership. Thank you for asking me to moderate, sir. I really appreciate the privilege and honor. Thank you for allowing Central Piedmont to be your host, and I will turn it over to you.
KANDI, thank you. I'm afraid all that means is I've been around a long time. But I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's been, I think, a stimulating meeting. I particularly want to thank our panel of participants, Governor Cooper, Speaker Moore, President Spellings, and Interim President HAYCOOD, and especially our moderator, KANDI, and Dean McIntyre from UNC Charlotte. Folks, you've done a great job. I think it's been a very enlightening session for me. In this period of divisiveness and political turmoil, there's one thing that I believe we can all agree on, and that's the value, even the necessity of a post-secondary education. And the rewarding or encouraging thing to me is that these folks, these are the leaders that can really make things happen in public higher education. And and I hear a great deal of agreement and people on the same page. And so maybe we're in a good place in public higher education in the state, but we can do even better. And I think particularly in the area of access, affordability, and completion, but there's a lot can be done to enhance what we have, but we are fortunate. We are in a very good place on public higher education. But to quote President Spellings, if you don't have a post-secondary degree in 2017, you're pretty much on a dead end. And whether it's a degree or specific skill development is vital for a successful career and at least middle-class achievement. Now, North Carolinians have always been highly supportive of public higher education, whether it be the universities or our community college, both of which are highly respected nationally and globally. And the proof of North Carolinian support of it is the last two bond issues we've had. The first one, I think, was somewhere with 70% on a $3 billion bond issue. The last one was a 2-to-1 vote on what was about a $2 billion bond issue, I think. But North Carolinians have consistently, over a long time, supported public higher education. There have been many ideas shared here tonight that can help make college and post-education skill development more affordable and more accessible. Post-secondary education has been what this state has set this state apart for decades. I've said this over and over. It's made people think of us as the most progressive state in the Southeast. Just look at the impact at RTP in the Triangle, or the impact that UNC Charlotte and your outstanding Central Piedmont Community College have made in Charlotte. I even heard Hugh McCall once say that he learned a lot of what he knew in banking right here at Central Piedmont Community College, and I'm sure that's true. I think there are three essentials for public higher education in the state in order to enhance its tremendous positive impact on economic growth. Number one, we must sustain our historical strong support for public higher education, and we must do a heck of a lot better in pre-K and K through 12. And as pointed out here tonight, we got to do a better job of paying the people that teach our kids. We got to keep education above the political fray. We can differ at times on how we go about it, but we should never allow there to be any question about our commitment to education and our understanding that it is the key to economic growth for North Carolina. All of us, Republicans, Democrats, independents, universities, community colleges, pre-K, K through 12, have really got to work together for a better educational experience and a better outcome for all North Carolinians. It's not a time to get caught up in our own agenda or our own ideology, but it's a time to pull together to improve and expand education opportunities for people in this state. And I am really encouraged by what we've heard tonight from these leaders that can really happen. Before I close, I want to thank again the staff of Higher Education Works for their stellar work in putting this event on. Emma Battle, David Rice, Matthew Chamberlain, Deborah Roselli, and Tricia Daisley, all of which are with us tonight. Would you folks stand? Now, you might have done it once, but there's a lot of work went in this thing. And Representative Craig Horn and Representative John Fraley, thanks for coming. It's a real pleasure having you guys here. And we've got a number of our board members out there tonight. I think Karen Pop, Dean Castaldo, Alan Wilson, Sally Russell. I think Sally was coming. William Dudley and Jim Babb was coming, but had an email to him today that he's laid up with an extremely bad cold, so could not make it. So, and thanks again to Bank of America. I mean, what a great organization that is. I was fortunate enough to serve on that board for a number of years, so it's a real pleasure to me to connect with them and to work with them and to be a sponsor of this event. So thanks for coming. You folks have been marvelous. So go home and do all this stuff you talked about. Thank you.